Simon, Laura, and Ellie Caldwell seemed like the perfect family living in a quiet neighborhood. Until one rainy morning, when Simon's lifeless body was found hidden in their basement, and the mother and daughter vanished without a trace. What secrets were they hiding behind closed doors? On a cold and rainy Thursday morning in October 2019, the quiet neighborhood of Dunsfield was shaken by an unexpected call to the local police station. An anonymous tip had come in, reporting a strange, foul smell coming from a house on Whitmore Street, number 41. The neighborhood was known for its peaceful streets, families who knew each other by name, and well-kept lawns. Nothing about this street suggested that something sinister could be happening behind one of its closed doors. When officers arrived, the house looked perfectly normal. The windows were intact, the front door was locked but showed no signs of forced entry, and Simon Caldwell's car was still parked in the driveway. Neighbors watched with growing curiosity as the police quietly approached the house. No one had heard any noise, no cries for help, no signs of trouble. The silence itself felt strange. Inside the house, the air was heavy and musty, but it was only when they descended to the basement that the source of the smell became clear. Beneath a pile of old blankets and a large tarp, the officers uncovered the body of Simon Caldwell. He was 44 years old, a well-liked teacher at the local high school, known for his quiet nature and dedication to his students. His death had gone unnoticed for over a week. The scene was chilling in its stillness. No struggle, no visible wounds, just a man who had quietly died in the home he shared with his wife Laura and their teenage daughter Ellie. What puzzled the officers most was the absence of Laura and Ellie. The family had lived there together, but neither had reported Simon missing. The unanswered questions began piling up immediately. Why hadn't anyone noticed Simon's absence? Why were his wife and daughter nowhere to be found? And how could someone die in their own home without raising any alarms? As news of the discovery spread, neighbors began to share what they knew, or thought they knew. Most described the Caldwells as a typical family, friendly but private. Laura, a stay-at-home mum, often took Ellie to school, and Simon had a routine of leaving early for work. No one recalled hearing raised voices or seeing anything unusual. To them, the family was normal, maybe even perfect. But behind this perfect image, the police suspected there was something darker. The locked doors and silence weren't signs of peace. They were signs of secrets hidden just out of sight. The officers began searching the house more thoroughly, hoping to find clues that could explain the mystery. Every drawer, every room was examined. The basement, the place where Simon's body was found, raised the most questions. Why had he been there so long, and why hadn't Laura or Ellie called for help? Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing over the quiet street, where life appeared unchanged. Yet inside that house, everything was broken. The calm neighborhood had been hiding a tragedy no one saw coming. As the investigation opened, what had once seemed like an ordinary family began to look like the center of a chilling puzzle. One that would reveal how little we sometimes know about the lives behind closed doors. After the shocking discovery of Simon Caldwell's body, the police shifted their focus to finding Laura and Ellie, the missing members of the family. The quiet neighborhood was suddenly filled with whispers and suspicion, but no one knew where the mother and daughter had gone. The officers combed through the house for any sign of their whereabouts, but found nothing. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The investigation soon uncovered a strange detail that deepened the mystery. Bank records showed that just days before Simon's death, Laura had withdrawn every last penny from their joint savings account. It was an unusually large sum of money to take out all at once, and there was no clear explanation for what happened. to it afterward. This sudden financial move raised red flags for the detectives. Was Laura planning to run away? And if so, why? What was she trying to escape? Further clues came from security cameras at a nearby gas station. Late one night, just after the money was withdrawn, Laura and Ellie were caught on footage leaving town. They were driving a silver SUV loaded with several large suitcases. The images showed determination in their hurried movements, as if they were fleeing something urgent. But there were no phone calls, no messages, no contact with anyone from their old life. It was as if they had erased themselves from the world they once knew. The police reached out to airports, bus stations, and hotels, hoping to find a trace of the two. Tips began to pour in from worried citizens who spotted people matching their descriptions in distant cities. But none of the sightings were confirmed. The trail seemed to grow colder by the day, and the mystery of Laura and Ellie's disappearance only grew deeper. Meanwhile, investigators dug into the Caldwell family's past. Neighbors who once praised the family now shared uneasy memories. Odd noises late at night, hurried arguments that stopped when anyone came close, and strange behavior from Simon in the weeks before his death. Some recalled that he had become increasingly paranoid, always checking his phone and glancing nervously over his shoulder. There were whispers of tension between Simon and Laura, though no one had ever seen open conflict. Detectives also found emails and messages on Simon's computer hinting at growing distrust. He accused Laura of infidelity and accused her of hiding things from him. Whether these accusations were true or the signs of a troubled mind was unclear, but the couple's relationship was clearly fractured, torn apart by fear and suspicion. The investigation revealed a house full of secrets, a family living under a surface of silence. Police theorized that Laura and Ellie had fled not just to avoid suspicion, but to escape something far more dangerous. The truth, however, remained hidden, locked away behind closed doors where no one could see. As the days stretched on, the case became more than just a missing persons search. It turned into a race against time to uncover what had truly happened to the Caldwell family. Every new lead only raised more questions. Who was really responsible for Simon's death? And what terrible secret had forced a mother and daughter to vanish without a trace? The answers lay just out of reach, buried in a story that was far from over. Forensic reports finally revealed a shocking truth. Simon Caldwell's death was not natural. Tests showed the presence of a rare poison in his bloodstream, a chemical so unusual that it wasn't something one could easily obtain. This discovery shifted the investigation from a mysterious death to a potential murder case. The poison was identified as a highly specialized industrial compound, used only in certain factories and laboratories, and strictly controlled due to its dangerous nature. This was no ordinary crime. It involved careful planning and knowledge. Detectives began digging into Simon's life, trying to find any link to this poison. Who could have access to such a deadly substance? No evidence suggested Simon worked with chemicals or had any connection to industries that used it. This made the purchase and use of the poison all the more suspicious. Soon, the investigation uncovered a critical piece of evidence: online orders placed under a fake name for lab, equipment and chemicals matching the poison found in Simon's body. The deliveries were sent to a nearby town, carefully concealed in packages to avoid attention. The trail led back to Laura Caldwell. The discovery was chilling. Why would Laura, a mother and wife, order such dangerous materials? What was she planning? The more the police examined, the stranger the picture became. Laura had been buying these chemicals in secret for months, but there was no clear explanation. It seemed she had been preparing something in advance. This cold calculation suggested premeditation, but detectives weren't ready to jump to conclusions without understanding the full story. Searches of the Caldwell house revealed a small, makeshift laboratory hidden in the basement behind a false wall. Inside, remnants of chemical containers, protective gear, and detailed notes suggested someone had been working in secret. This hidden workspace raised serious questions. Had Laura been planning to poison Simon? Or was it possible Simon had been experimenting with these chemicals himself? The answers were far from simple. At the same time, investigators learned about Laura's background in chemistry, a fact unknown to neighbors and friends. Before marrying Simon, Laura had studied chemical sciences at university and worked in a research lab. Her knowledge explained how she could acquire and handle such dangerous substances, but it also made her involvement in the poisoning more believable. Despite mounting evidence, the police faced a puzzling contradiction. Laura had vanished along with Ellie, and there was no sign of the two since the gas station footage weeks earlier. Had Laura fled to avoid capture, or was she trying to protect her daughter from a deeper danger? Some officers began to suspect that Laura's actions, while extreme, might have been driven by fear and desperation rather than cold-hearted malice. The rare poison found in Simon's body was a deadly weapon, but the motive behind its use remained unclear. Was it a deliberate act of murder, or a tragic attempt to escape a terrifying situation? The investigation entered a new, more complicated phase. Every new clue only deepened the mystery. The careful secrecy, the hidden lab, and the disappearance of Laura and Ellie pointed to a family torn apart by secrets too dark to share. As detectives followed the trail of poison and deception, they realized the truth would shock everyone who thought they knew the Caldwells. Behind closed doors, nothing was as simple as it seemed. Weeks after the police discovered Simon Caldwell's body and uncovered the poison that ended his life, a breakthrough came when Ellie was finally found. She was located in a small town, several states away, living with her older half-sister from her mother's previous marriage. Ellie appeared nervous but unharmed, a teenager clearly shaken by months of uncertainty and fear. When investigators spoke with her, she revealed a story that no one had expected, a story that would turn the case upside down. Ellie described her father not as the calm, gentle teacher the community had known, but as a man consumed by anger and paranoia behind closed doors. She said that in the months leading up to his death, Simon had changed drastically. He grew controlling and violent, lashing out at Laura and Ellie over the smallest things. The quiet house on Whitmore Street, so peaceful to the outside world, was filled with tension and fear. She recalled nights when her parents argued so loudly that she could barely sleep, and times when she hid in her room, trembling, hoping the violence wouldn't come to her. Ellie painted a picture of a family living under constant pressure, with Laura desperately trying to protect her and keep the peace. The accusations Simon hurled at Laura, claims of infidelity and betrayal, were part of a spiral into darkness, fueled by his growing paranoia and fear of losing control. Ellie's testimony challenged everything the police had believed so far. The hidden laboratory in the basement, the strange chemicals, suddenly they made more sense. According to Ellie, Laura's secret purchases were not signs of a cold-blooded killer plotting murder, but desperate attempts to defend her family and find a way out of the nightmare. Laura had tried to seek help, Ellie said, reaching out to friends and even social services, but the family's private troubles remained largely hidden. Fear kept them silent, trapped behind the walls of their home. Ellie described how her mother had planned their escape carefully, withdrawing the money and packing their bags to flee before Simon could hurt them again. The poison that took Simon's life, Ellie claimed, was not an act of calculated murder, but a tragic last resort. Laura had feared what her husband might do next. The chemical was meant to protect, not to kill. Ellie's words painted Laura as a woman pushed to the edge, caught in a situation that spiraled far beyond what anyone could imagine. This new perspective complicated the investigation. Police officers and prosecutors were faced with a painful question. Was Laura a murderer or a victim? Ellie's testimony highlighted the blurred line between justice and mercy, raising doubts about the simple labels of guilt and innocence. As the case moved toward trial, the public was captivated by the unfolding drama. The quiet family that had seemed so ordinary was revealed to be anything but. Behind closed doors, a story of pain, fear, and survival had been hidden from view. The truth was no longer just about one death. It was about the broken lives left behind and the desperate choices made in the darkest moments. Ellie's account became a turning point in the case, forcing everyone to reconsider what really happened inside the Caldwell home. It was a story about love and fear, trust and betrayal, and the terrible costs of secrets kept too long. The mystery was far from over, but one thing was clear: nothing was as it seemed behind those closed doors. The courtroom was filled with tension as the trial of Laura Caldwell began. The case had captured the public's attention, not just because of the shocking death of Simon Caldwell, but because of the complicated story that had emerged behind closed doors. The jury faced the difficult task of deciding whether Laura was a cold-blooded murderer or a desperate mother, pushed to the edge by years of fear and abuse. Throughout the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of calculated crime. They presented the evidence of the rare poison, the secret lab, and the careful planning that went into Simon's death. Prosecutors argued that Laura had poisoned her husband with intent, using her chemical knowledge to carry out a perfect murder. They emphasized the empty bank account, the disappearance of Laura and Ellie, and the cold, secretive nature of the crime scene. But the defense offered a very different story. They brought forward Ellie's testimony about the violence and paranoia that had taken over the Caldwell household. They described Laura as a victim of domestic abuse, someone who had acted out of fear for her life and her daughter's safety. The defense argued that Laura's actions were desperate attempts to protect her family from a dangerous man whose behavior had become unpredictable and violent. Witnesses from social services, psychologists, and neighbors testified about signs of abuse that had been missed or ignored. The defense also highlighted Laura's background in chemistry as a reason why she might have known how to handle the poison, but not necessarily with malicious intent. They argued that the case was not about premeditated murder, but a tragic outcome of a broken family struggling to survive. As the trial went on, the courtroom atmosphere grew heavy with emotion. The jury was faced with conflicting narratives, one of cold calculation, the other of fear and desperation. News outlets covered every detail, and the public debated fiercely over who to believe. After weeks of testimony, the case came down to a single difficult question. Could the jury believe that Laura had acted in self-defense, or was she guilty of murder? The judge reminded them to consider all the evidence carefully, without letting emotion cloud their judgment. In the end, the jury returned a verdict that surprised many. Laura Caldwell was found guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The verdict reflected the complexity of the case, recognizing that while Laura's actions caused Simon's death, there was enough evidence to show she had been driven by fear and a desperate need to protect her family. The decision acknowledged the painful reality that sometimes, behind closed doors, people are forced to make impossible choices. The community of Dunsfield was left to grapple with the outcome. The quiet streets where neighbors once smiled and waved now carried the weight of a family tragedy. The perfect image of the Caldwells had been shattered, replaced by a story of pain, secrets, and survival. Though the case was officially closed, many questions lingered. How could no one see the signs of suffering? How many families suffer in silence, hidden behind closed doors? The Whitmore Street mystery became a haunting reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that sometimes the darkest stories unfold when no one is watching. Laura Caldwell's trial was more than a criminal case. It was a mirror reflecting the hidden struggles of many. It forced the world to ask, how well do we really know the lives behind the doors we pass every day? And what can be done to help those trapped inside before it's too late?